Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the LNUR podcast, a podcast for LEGO train fans. We have a couple of members with us to discuss the topic of the day, which is the Southern LEGO Train Club, which is LSUR, LEGO Southern UK Railway. So we started as a very niche club for Northern LEGO train fans in the northeast of England, and we've sort of expanded. We'll probably explain a bit why later, but we've sort of expanded to cover the south as well. So with me we have members. We have Levi, who's our podcast producer at the moment.
Hello there.
We have Trace, who has disappeared from his microphone. We have Henry.
Hello.
Will.
Hello there.
Rory.
Hello.
And John.
Hello.
Excellent. So, welcome aboard. We have, as usual, some news, and we have a review of some LEGO trains on LEGO ideas as well. So we're going to start off with news, and the first thing up, I think, is for me, isn't it? It's a new website for LEGO train fans who are into the 12-volt era LEGO trains, which is myself included. Darren needs to be here for this one, really. So the website is 12v-grey.com. And I think this is built, it's quite recently released. It's by a German or possibly Austrian LEGO fan, and it aims to catalogue all of the LEGO 12-volt train sets and all the accessories and things like that. It's quite a nice resource for LEGO train fans who are into their more classic train sets and things like that. Our next bit of news is from Trace about Brick Train Depot. So off you go, Trace.
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple bits of American stateside LEGO train news. We'll start with the one from Brick Train Depot. They recently did a quiz where they challenged their followers both on Instagram and Facebook as to whether they preferred steam or diesel. And in an overwhelming majority, it looks like steam has won out. Concerning the fact that their Mohawk instructions that they had placed somewhere in award ceremonies, and a lot of their instructions have been very accessible for people to buy. I think there's a lot of favoritism when it comes to that LEGO Steam category, especially with their particular breed of followers. So yeah, LEGO Steam has won. Just wanted to let everyone know that that is what's reigning supreme.
Thank you, Trace. We can cut this bit out of the podcast. Nobody needs to know that. What was the second bit of news?
The second thing was just talking about the Brick Model Railroader pre-orders for their new custom printed engineers.
Oh yes, they are very cool. We'll try and link to those in the description as well.
Sounds great. We'll just cut it all out. Get rid of this.
Thanks, Trace. Finally, there's a leak of a new LEGO City train set, and Will's going to cover that one for us.
Yes, it appears we are getting a new, as we expected, freight train set in the near future. This one consists of your usual loop of track and a siding, an unusual buffer design, which is very hard to quite work out how they built it. It almost looks like it's got springs on it, but I don't think it does. A crane and a modern image-looking electric loco, which I think looks quite a lot like a Class 92, but I've heard other people suggest it looks like other British or European prototypes, and frankly, they're not wrong. It's intentionally generic, but it looks smart. And some very strange-looking trucks. The least strange of which is the car carrier wagon, which will definitely strike any wires that poor logo is running under. My point of view, I think it looks like a smart little standard set. It appears to not have any buildings, which would not be surprising. They're probably going to try and put it at the same price point, but give us less bricks. My only real complaint about the set is the AFOL backlash about why can't we have some steam engines like the ones that we have in these groups? And I'm like, well, because those are way out of the part count and cost count and age range that this set is aimed at.
Yep, I think quite right. And we can probably unmute for some members at this point if they have any opinions of the LEGO train set. Lego City train set leak. I think John's just unmuted. So, John.
Yeah, hi. I had a look at that, and the pictures on the web are not that clear. But I think that buffer stop you referred to, William, is actually an end loading ramp of some sort.
That
so,
makes
yeah.
sense. That does make sense, especially with the car. The
It's
car
a play feature, isn't it?
Bearing in mind that
it'd
on
still
standard
fit, wouldn't it?
6-wide train base, I'm not sure you'd be able to fit a wider car on that.
I think it'd fit. I think it would just overhang a bit, which is
Well,
fine.
yeah, but you won't be able to get it on and off the back of the wagon, because the supports will be in the way.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move on to Rory's ideas. So Lego trains on Lego ideas. Rory.
Hello. So we've got 3 Lego ideas to talk about today. 3 different-ish ones. The first one is it's the Mediterranean train station, which is a quite small standalone station in what I can assume is a Mediterranean style. It's depicted as coming with some track with some pseudo ballasting and sleepers on it. Is a quite nice arched open design, so it's got a lot of interior and lots of sort of touristy bits going on, and what looks like a balcony with an upstairs catering thing or something like that. It's by Paldix, and it currently has 1,088 supporters and 245 days left on that one. The second one, which I like a lot, is Steam Train Line 1899 by Banana Brick 01, which currently has 364 supporters and 406 days left. This has it's listed as having a Caledonian Jumbo 060 steam locomotive and some kind of heritage style carriage with it as well as a facade of a station. It looks like quite a nice steam engine. It seems to be mainly 6-wide, but a few things that push it out to more like 7-wide. It actually depicts a opening smoke box door, which is unusual for models of this size, and it's designed to accommodate powered up systems.
It looks really nice. I like the car as well.
Yes, it's a nice.
Wheels are maybe a bit big.
It's nice, sort of its period. They've done that really well, rather than sort of being modelled. It really fits in with the period it's supposed to be doing.
It's a shame that car, as it's built, will never make it through the ideas, because those wheels are older than I am, and Lego definitely doesn't make them anymore.
The wheel spokes aren't made anymore, as far as I know.
The rubber, that type of rubber tire as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few things like that. I'm just looking at the porter's trolley on the platform, and I'm not sure I recognise that part, so I don't know when that's from. But it's a very nice model all the same. And then
I don't recognise on that.
I'm not sure about that. And then we've got the third one is it's not a sort of traditional train thing. It's a microscale model. It's a set of civil engineering bridges. It's called The World of Civil Engineering Types of Bridges, and it's by Mockingbird. And that currently has 6,048 supporters and 734 days left. So it's actually got a chance of making it at least to the 10,000 mark. And it's a series of, I think there's 7 different micro-scale models of different bridges. I'm assuming they're either real bridges or different types of bridges, some of which are railway or train bridges. There's I think a tram bridge in there as well. It's just quite an interesting, different look at things like that we don't normally see.
I think that's probably my favourite of the 3, and I've seen it a lot in various Facebook groups, so hopefully it'll make it. And it probably has most chance of making it because it's not actually a train set. It's more like an architecture style thing, isn't it?
It's not too niche, which the other ones realistically are, as nice as they are, they're just too niche. But this is it's got the potential to have a nice broad appeal to different groups of people, really.
Yeah, I think so.
I rather like the one based on what looks like the Chinese maglev train. That looks quite cool. The one on the front. Yeah. Either that or a couple of Star Trek shuttles back to back. But anyway.
It does look very Yeah, there's nice variation, nice colours. Okay, it's not fully rail related, but I think it works.
Yeah, I like the one that's being built with the crane, to be honest. I think that looks really nice, sort of the way they depicted that tower crane.
Some nice ideas, and it's small enough to, it might be an £80 set or a $100 set or something when it's built. But I think it's really nice.
That'll have the same problem that architecture sets have. Very small builds, lots and lots of very small pieces, stupidly insane prices.
Yeah, probably.
It's not a thing that would look good on people. Like, people would buy it because they could stick it on a shelf, but not very big, and they could leave it in an office or something. And it's got people would put it and display it quite easily, which is quite nice. I think it looks like they all clip together, or they can be clipped apart as separate displays as well.
Yeah, I really like that one. I think it's not entirely train related, but I'm a bridge fan as well. But that's very nice. Thank you, Rory, for those 3 ideas. We can move on to our topic of the day, which is the Southern Lego Railway Club, or rather the Lego Southern UK Railway Club, and its layout or layouts, depending on what you want. So I think the first topic we're going to cover, which seems to make sense, is why it was started. And I can start with this, and then I might pass to Levi, who was sort of around from almost the start. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, we were a club that was based primarily in the northeast of England. So we covered kind of Newcastle upon Tyne and York, and we had some layouts there, and then people started building locos and scenery for shows. And then we got a bit more interest, and we started getting inquiries from the south of England, from people in sort of Norfolk and Portsmouth and South Coast, London, the Midlands as well. And we said, well, they still like Lego trains, so why not? And then eventually, at some point, there was kind of enough people to justify trying to create a sort of southern layout and a southern club, because part of the problem we have, even though the UK is quite a small country, is that we have a layout based at the moment. It's based in Newcastle, so any journey south is a lot of hours, isn't it, Will?
Yes, it is.
Do you remember we'll speak about this a bit later, but we did an event at the Spa Valley Railway with our it's a model railway show, but we took our Lego layout, or rather Levi's layout, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, down there, and because of bad traffic, it took Will about 8.5 hours to drive down.
The problem you've got, especially when shows are, is it is impossible to travel from the north to the south or vice versa on a Saturday or on a Friday or a Sunday without hitting traffic somewhere, often multiple times.
It's very true. So that was a bit of a roundup of kind of where we started from, and I think maybe Levi, or is Henry still here? Yes, Henry's still here.
Yes, I'm still here.
You might have some more idea of numbers of members these days, because I think the club generally across the UK has about 40 members or so. Levi, do you want to take over and explain a bit about your involvement and what you did, and then we can pass that maybe for some membership numbers, and then we can pass over to other members.
Yes, so I basically had a casual conversation with Richard, who at the time still is the chairman of what was LNUR, and there were enough of us around in the south. I think there were 3 of us at the time, and we figured that we could. At first, it was just a group chat on Messenger and whatever, and then it slowly became a bit more. We started planning a layout, which we'll go into a bit more detail later, but it just sort of grew from there, and I think we've probably got about 14 of us down south now, I'm sure. So, we make up a relatively large portion of what was essentially a northern club. Our first, what I'd call a prototype show, was at the Spa Valley, as Richard said, where I brought along a small single loop countryside-esque layout with 2 sets of sidings on the front. We learned that single loops without a run round loop anywhere on the layout is a really bad idea, as you can't prep the next train while having one run. And we encountered the big problem of everyone standing around the front of the layout. But Henry, you got anything else to add?
Just that I did enjoy that show, but yeah, we learned that we very, very much need sidings for layout, and also that tables are very, very uneven.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point, Henry. This is something we found. I think at most venues is if you're relying on the venue tables, they're very uneven, and even the flatter tables are sort of bowed in the middle because of age or weight they've had on them. So some sort of baseboards would be good, which is long term, I think, what we're planning.
Yes.
Yep. Does anyone else have anything to add to that story? I think Rory joined in reasonably early, didn't you?
He joined last August.
I was one of the later members. The Southern group was pretty much already established, so I'm more of a later interloper, to be honest, than anything else.
Yeah, we had, because it sort of started off as me, Levi, and Luke, and then we had Tim joining. Sort of, I think it was about a year ago he joined, and then we sort of picked up Rory, I think, was the next major one, and then we've also got Emily as well, and then there were a few others who've joined but who haven't had as much to do with the actual Southern Club. Like Andrew was already a member, but he's not had as much to do with our layout because he already has all his robots and trains and stuff, though he will be with us at Acton, I believe.
Okay, so that's Levi's layout for the Spa Valley Railway Model Railway Show in September 2021. We can move on a bit. So I think that sort of fed some of the inspiration for the first proper version of the Southern Club layout. So does someone want to talk about the track plan? I think probably Henry or Levi is probably best for this.
I'll take this.
Okay, off you go.
Okay.
How did we improve the one we had at Spa?
Yeah, so me, Luke and Levi, back when it was just us, did have a couple of planning meetings about what we wanted to do with the layout. We came up with a sort of general track plan, which was broadly followed having a single oval of track with a sort of fiddle yard with sidings at the back, scenic on approximately the front half, and then a pair of switches at the front so that we could have a siding along there. And that ended up being fairly similar to what Levi brought to Spa, except without the sidings at the front, and instead he didn't have the extra siding at the front, he had them inside at the front and no passing loop, which, as we learned, wasn't good, so we're glad we went with it. And then originally we'd sort of split it up into sections which different people were going to do, and then as the members involved changed, we sort of different people had different sections. I'm the only one that's actually got the same section they started with.
You basically have, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as when we first decided on the layout. So, yeah, so the track plan is currently, I'm sure Levi will include an image of this. It is that basic oval with some fiddle yard sidings at the back, which, although we have got a set track plan here, basically we just do whatever we have with the track and space available at shows, because it's not ballasted, it's not meant to be seen by the public really, so we're not too bothered about it being a certain way. And then the front, we've got the loop coming around, the sidings, And one thing we did at Reading that worked really well is we just had a train shuttling up and down on that siding at the front, which worked very well. Or we'd have one train running round constantly and another one being controlled, and they were going in opposite directions so they could pass at the station. And then
I think we learned our lesson from that, because one loop with no passing loops was a bad idea, especially when we had 3 or 4 members on a layout running for the weekend. So even with one loop, with a passing loop at the back and the front, you can
do a lot.
You can do a lot more, and also you can do a bit of shunting towards the front.
Yes.
And it's a bit more operationally interesting for us and also the public. And thankfully, Levi's signals, he had some working signals that the public can control at the first proper show, which was Reading. And he can speak about those in a second, I guess. So Levi had on the southern layout, Levi had created some signals that the public could move at the front. So we got kids and adults controlling the signals, and then depending on how much attention our Lego train drivers behind the layout were paying, the train should stop at the signal, and the kids enjoyed that. And it was a bit of a different take on the club's playout, which Will runs, where the kids get to drive the trains, and it kind of doesn't matter about signals and things. So that was pretty good. Would anyone like to chip anything in before we move on? No. Okay. Weirdly quiet. Should we talk about some landscaping next?
Well, I think if we're talking about landscaping, we should get Levi to talk about his landscaping that has made everyone else in the club very, very poor.
Yeah.
Amen to that, sister.
Yep. So Levi started a trend within our club, landscaping-wise, to build plate-based embankments, which are very costly. They look awesome, but are very costly. So Levi, given that your original corner sort of ended up mutating into the corner for the Southern Layout Club with some track alterations and sizing and stuff, would you like to speak about how you built that, why you built it, why you've cost us all a lot of money?
Yeah, so I basically had yet to see a really nicely landscape depth wise. There was a lot of plates angled at, and that was just a smooth slope upwards. And I went with the first thing I thought of, and it ended up being the most expensive thing ever that I still somewhat regret introducing to this day because of the amount of bricks I bought, and others have bought as well. It's a simple. Basically, you start off your structure by planning your rough hill, never working in squares but more just a general shape, and then from there you use 4x4 plates or 4x8 plates built up on 2x4 bricks or whatever, build a sort of a block sort of idea, and then from there you can then spend thousands of plates one by all the small ones into just building up and up. You start refining the detail, and then from there, it sort of all just comes together quite well, and it's a very Lego-y take on landscape. It literally just bricks upon bricks. I think it looks rather good.
It does. It looks good enough that Will and I have both copied you. So I've copied you for the Northern Club layout, and Will's copied you for the playout. And I think it does. It looks quite classically Lego because you can see a lot of studs. And
can I just jump in on something you just said?
Yeah, Will can go.
The point you made about the studs being visible, I particularly like that because my building technique for buildings and for trains and everything else is to try and hide the studs. So I think having the studs visible on the quote-unquote natural landscape helps differentiate it from the man-made landscape and gives you
I would agree.
The natural bricks as opposed to human intervention flat bricks or whatever.
Yeah, well, the way I see it is that sort of the smooth sort of tiled or at the very least studs not visible is more for me at least. I see that more for surfaces that should be sort of flat and smooth, like on a locomotive, whereas studs should be where they would be rougher, like a natural landscape, or possibly like a path, or something sort of rough and ready and generally natural. I feel like you'd have the studs there more naturally because it hasn't been sort of modified by humans.
Yeah. No, I think it sounds like we're all in the same sort of mindset where, man-made stuff is smooth, natural stuff is rough. So the studs sort of mimic that, even though it's a grid of studs and it's quite repetitive and it's maybe not natural in that order. John, I think you had something for us.
Yeah, I just thought of one of the subjects we discussed at maybe a year or more ago on one of the podcasts was regarding mixing traditional model railway scenery with Lego trains on a display, and I know it's been done with reasonably good success, and it kind of is a demarcation point. You can actually have the Lego used for the trains, the stations, the signal boxes, the signals, the line side buildings, that kind of thing. And beyond that, you go for a more natural and much cheaper model railway solution. Has anyone thought about going that way?
I think Will has recently. I know Carl Great Tricks did to great success quite a while ago.
I have considered it, and if I ever do a Lego project with the members of the Model Railway Club I'm part of, I think that would be a very logical thing to do. But at the moment, I'm sort of involved in a model railway that's a proper model railway in Lego, but as Lego, it doesn't seem to be an awful lot of point mixing the two up.
I'm quite the same. I'm involved with LUKR quite heavily, but then I'm also independently a member of the Model Railway Club, which I do, more traditional model railways with. So to me, I like sort of having them separate, but then, I will mix them. Like, I hope at some point we will be having a Lego layout at our show, whether it's like, a small personal one, or we manage to get one of our larger club layouts. I don't know, but yeah,
I am now officially the most reliable layout in my club.
What, the playout?
Yeah, you can guarantee that if the club doesn't show, the playout will be there. Everything else is up in there. You can guarantee the playout will end up there.
It is a good one for the kids to get them into model railway.
We lost our Thomas layout very shortly after I joined, and then all the posters that we use, because for some reason we use the same poster every time, have photographs of Thomas the Tank Engine saying Thomas will be here, and they're like, "Well, can you help?" So that's why I keep begging and borrowing Thomas characters off everybody else.
Okay, thank you. I think we can speak a bit about. So this was a first for the club. The southern layout had some backboards we'd made, which were made by Levi again. So Levi, do you want to talk us through the backboards and what the idea of them was and how you made them a bit?
I think it was just a case of having, a well-presented layout that was ruined by the fact you could see the fiddle yard and all the drinks and food that was left behind. And, as someone that's come somewhat from the model railway, world, the easy solution was backboards. And albeit, you could have done it with Lego, and many people have, suggested it. It would be awfully expensive to cover what is essentially about a 5 meter squared area with Lego. So,
we have done that before. We did that with baseboards in Portugal, and I think a Yorkshire Brick Show as well. We had blue baseboards sort of propped up against the back as a backdrop, but it is a very expensive way of doing it, and they were more wobbly than the backboards, I will say.
Yeah, the problem with baseboards is they've got these studs underneath, so everything structural has to be up front, which maybe with more planning we could have done something about that. But then
we don't do planning, do we? Yeah, we don't do planning.
You northerners might not, but we've had multiple planning meetings for the southern layout.
That's a difference
mean
between
it's
a
planned.
planning meeting and actually planning. We've done many planning meetings. We've never done any planning.
Oh, I mean, there wasn't much planning. It was mainly me and John trying to get Levi to consider how realistic his goals are. They weren't at all.
Most of our meetings are us arguing with Carter that, in fact, that won't work, so don't do it.
Okay, I think the first official show for the Southern Layout was the Reading Brick Show.
Yes.
So I think I was there, but I think we can probably pass to Levi and Henry, who were there, and Rory, about their thoughts on how the layout worked, how it didn't work, and what we're going to do to sort of improve it for future events. So I'm going to be quiet.
So at Reading, one thing we tried for the first time was running 2 trains on the loop, but in opposite directions, which was possible because we had a passing loop at the front and one at the back, and because the switches we had, which are Trix Bricks R104 points, they're sprung loaded, and so we were able to set the routes so that they would just go down the correct route but then spring back on the one, so we didn't have to worry about changing any of the points. And that worked really well because we had 2 trains running at a time, which was both more interesting for the public and also more interesting for us operating it. And it also meant that because we had locomotives of different speeds, the slower one would generally be left just to run, while the faster one you would have to actually control to make sure it stopped in the 2 sidings at the right time. But it also meant you'd have a range of different speeds being shown, which made it more operationally interesting and more interesting for the public to watch. And also, another advantage of having the passing loop at the back was it meant that we could take one train off and get another one that started and on the tracks, while we just had another one running round, so that there was much less downtime when we wanted to swap the trains or we needed to change batteries or something like that.
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, I think I agree. The having 2 loops and a running loop at the back, essentially with 1 loop, was a lot better, and it also enabled more members to be driving at the same time and someone to control the signals. So we had more hands-on. I don't know. I feel like John hasn't.
Was also good was that even though it still was possible for one driver with 2 controls to control both trains, it still could be single person operated, although we had the options for having multiple people as well.
Yeah, that's it. So it's kind of easy to run by itself if you're short of people, but if there are more people there, there's actually stuff for them to do. John, I was about to ask you, in your kind of early days of Lego train exhibitions and things, how did layouts run? Because I've seen a couple of what I presume was probably NBLTC, so Northern British Lego Train Club. I've seen some end-to-end layouts.
We didn't, from memory, we had an out and back once, but not an end-to-end. Now, whilst you mentioned Northern British Lego Train Club, the same thing happened back then, where we had a load of Southern members who wanted to join, and they kind of it kind of morphed into the British Association eventually with various other interests. But anyway, I'm digressing. When we had the big shows at Great Western Lego Show, as it was then, or Lego Train Show, we were running on 9-volt system, of course, and you could run more than one train. These layouts were quite long. I mean, I think one of the layouts was, in old money, at least 40 feet long, possibly 50 feet long. And the loops were really, really long, but there were only 2 loops. And there might have been a 3rd loop at the end in a small sort of section or something. But generally speaking, the fast trains would be running along at high speed along the front. And you could actually have 2 running on the same line, but they never ran at the same speed. So it did need a bit of careful control. Luckily, we had enough people controlling the trains, but I found it's very, very difficult when you're being asked questions to try and watch for accidents and things like that. It's almost impossible. And the public are to blame, of course. But the other thing, I was a bit mischievous, to be fair. I had a battery powered motor luggage van model, which ran off the old 9-volt system, but it had its built-in battery, just like the prototype Class 419, and you could actually switch it from track power to battery power on the side. And the battery compartment, I'd taken some of the AA batteries out and shorted them, so it was only putting out about 3 volts or so, maybe 4.5, can't remember. And that would crawl along by itself. It would actually send power to the other trains that were sitting on the same track section. So it's quite amusing to see things move without people controlling the trains. And it was, I suppose, a bit childish, but it was fun.
Well, that's Lego Trains, isn't it? Childish but fun is probably our motto at some point. I think getting back to the kind of public asking you questions, we do find a lot that, particularly parents with young kids, and they're 4 or 5 and they're getting into, they really like trains and they're maybe about ready for a Lego City set. We find it's good to have somebody in front of the layout who can talk to people about that and know things. So sometimes I do it, sometimes it's Levi. Emily was really good at that at Reading. She's not a big train person, but I think she'd had over a couple of weekends with us, had soaked up so much information that she was able to just reel it off and get this train, or look on Amazon, or this is how the train systems work these days, and you can get remote control, or you can have a smartphone app.
Well, she's also a teacher, so she's good at the whole talking thing.
Especially talking down to children like us, I'm sure.
I think that's quite important, as it's a big thing that's missed at some of the shows. We do tend to be geeks in our hobby, and sometimes we're a little bit kind of on the edge of the spectrum, should we say? Some of us are, and it doesn't sort of necessarily lead to people who are good socially with strangers. So you need to have a mix of people or someone there who's forward and not shy.
I would agree. Part of going to an exhibition is you're showing your models to the public and people who, let's face it, they probably aren't hugely interested in Lego. It's just the day out for them. And their kids might like Lego, but they probably like the Spider-Man and the Batman Lego sets. So getting them into Lego Trains and getting them seeing something that works is how we get members in 20 years or 15 years or whenever they have disposable income after that.
Yes. I would also like to say it's very useful having you lot around at shows, because being autistic, talking to people is not my forte. I can answer questions, but I rely on you lot to do the approaching talking.
That's kind of what we're there for.
Yeah, that's why I keep you around.
We found on one of the Great Western shows, I experimented and I built a controller into the hill at the front of the layout. There may actually be a picture somewhere of it, so that I could stand in front of the layout with the public, control the train, so I still had my fun, if you like, and talk to people. And actually, if they wanted to have a go, I could show them that. But I think the controller I had was running a short end-to-end section or shunting siding or something. So it really shouldn't have been done that way at all, as you can imagine.
It's I think having the interaction though, because one problem with Lego exhibitions specifically, and we do exhibit at model railway shows as well, but the Lego exhibitions, kids are used to touching Lego and they want to touch Lego, and they see big models made of Lego, and especially the smaller ones want to touch it. So if you can give them an outlet for that, like go and drive a Lego train on this other layout we have, Will's layout's really good for that. And we are working on what we call a play out, sort of a play layout for the Southern Club at the moment. So I don't know whether, because Will's been a bit quiet for a while, which is very unusual, as regular listeners will know. So, Will and Levi, do you want to talk about your plans for Southern?
Wait, it's
Southern
Levi's
playout?
idea, so he should take the lead on that.
Well, it was a case of, okay, the North has this. How can I do it better? And
Controversial.
And,
okay.
Withdrawing support.
I shouldn't say much because Will's helping me with the wagons and the loco. But yeah, so I've basically designed a small. It's only about 8 base plates long, in terms of 32 by 32s. It's a small Inglenook shunting layout. And for those of you that aren't aware, an Inglenook layout is basically something with 3 sidings and a head shunt, and the sidings are of set lengths, so that there are only limited places you can put so many wagons, and you have to, obviously, you start off with however they all are, and then you get given a new order for them to go into. There's about 63,000 odd combinations or something ridiculous like that, which is quite impressive. I'm hoping to have that done in a few months. It may even be done by the time this podcast gets uploaded. I hope not, though, because that means I've been really slow. It's 9-volt controlled, with a bit of custom work done, as I didn't want to use R40 points because I despise them and hate them with every piece of my body. So I did some modifications to Brick's R104 points and a set of curves. I basically added copper tape to them and did a bit of soldering to kind of complete the circuit as such, depending on which way the point blade was set. And it all works. I mean, I've been experimenting recently with an uncoupler mechanism that basically just holds a wagon back as the loco pulls away. We've had a few issues with that, but it's being solved with blue tack, surprisingly.
I would like to say that, according to this website I found about the Inglenook, there are 6,720 different shunting orders possible.
It's pretty good for, 8 wagons and 3 sidings or something. So for a relatively small layout, and I think this is probably the appeal that Levi's seen and many other model railway builders have seen, that the Inglenook layout is, it's small in profile, it doesn't take a lot of resources to build, but you can run it all day, and not be bored. It's a really nice puzzle, actually. It's definitely worth looking, and we will link to it in the podcast description, hopefully. Levi,
do you guys think that got a display that the public are watching? Do you think it's more interesting for the public to see a shunting type layout?
I think a bit of both.
Yes.
I think having something running is a kind of priority, and I always say, if we have a layout at a show, something should be running all the time in public hours. It doesn't always happen because battery packs fail and people argue about crashes happen. People argue about what should be running, etc. But at least something should be running all the time in public hours, ideally. But I think also shunting layout, maybe people think running a Lego train around a loop is basically all it can do. So showing them that you can shunt with a circuit cube, or you can even do power functions or powered up.
I think the main thing you need to bear in mind when designing a railway, it doesn't matter if it's Lego, model railway, or whatever, is what do you want to achieve with your layout? If every layout was a tail chaser, the one shunting layout would be the most interesting layout in the show. If every layout was a shunting layout, the one tail chaser in the show would be the most interesting. You just need to know what you're planning to do with your layout before you do it. So the Inglenook is only ever going to be a shunting layout, and that is fine. The layout is only ever going to be a tail chaser, and that is fine. You just need to know what you're doing and lean into the strengths of that layout, and try and avoid what a lot of model railway shows have, which is 4 men stroking their beards and going, in half an hour, this just shunting maneuver will happen. Because it doesn't interest the punters very much to watch a static railway. You don't see the details if it's not moving.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
and
true.
Also,
and
most of us can't grow a beard.
with the traditional model railway layouts, I think there is a kind of desire to make it look like realistic operation. When with Lego, we can kind of get away with it being a bit more fun and operate a little bit faster and you don't need to wait for the shunter to uncouple it with a little tiny hook and a 3-link chain coupler. You can hopefully uncouple just with the hand of God, and then do the next shunt without, that kind of, it keeps the public interested without having to wait for the realistic time.
This is very much the problem we've come across with the Inglenook. So far, it's the only problem we haven't come up with a 100% solution to yet, is the coupling and uncoupling, because it's one thing when it's a guy who knows the trucks very well and knows where they can be pushed and where they can't. When you've got a child doing it who knows nothing about them and doesn't know whether there's a weak point or not, you need a uncoupling that doesn't involve grabbing hold of the thing that's going to break.
I mean, my suggestion is electromagnets.
Yes, I think the main problem with that is it would be expensive and hard to hide in the trucks.
Yes.
Okay, noted and put in the bin already, probably.
It's possible to do uncoupling, but it's making it reliable and affordable to build.
The two plans we've got at the moment is Levi's one, which is normal magnets, but make them weak enough that a small interference from the track will hold the truck hard enough that the loco can pull away without it. Or take some very old 00 gauge tension lock couplings, which are quite large, and basically bolt them onto some Lego pieces and use a ramp similar to how 00 trains use for uncoupling. Neither of which are ideal. And it's basically a case of doing a bit of experimentation to see which works. I'm kind of hoping the Lego option wins out, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I prefer a sort of more a Lego purist solution, but
the advantage in Part Model Railway Club, you can mention in passing to a random guy, has anybody got any of those old couplings that the Hornby used to use? And the next thing you know, somebody's got a bag full of them for you. So
yeah, hopefully so. We'll find a way to do it at some point. I don't think we just know what the solution is.
So at the moment, I need to find some old Lego bricks I don't mind damaging and attack them and see if it's a viable option at all.
The other option is to have some track-mounted device, but it limits where you can uncouple, of course, and it might not be universally possible to do it on everyone's stock.
Well, for Inglenook, we have a pretty good idea where it needs to uncouple. So it's more a case of just making it reliable and intuitive. And the problem with track mounted is because that was our first thought, just track mounted thing. But you need put a lot of effort in a 9-volt motor for it to pull away from a coupled wagon using the magnets. And frankly, a lot of the time, if the loco is not heavy enough, it will never get the traction it needs. And even if it does, you've then got a very fast, light locomotive rocketing off into the distance, and you haven't got very much track for it to rocket off into. So it would end up in disaster very quickly.
Okay. Does anybody else have something to discuss about the layout, the Southern Club layout of Southern Club before we move on? We're hopefully nearing the end of this podcast. We'll see. So we have some future shows, and given that I didn't delegate this, I'll just read through them very quickly, and then we can move on to a couple of things about the future aims for the layout, and then wrap up the podcast. So future shows, and we are recording this the 25th of April 2022. So our next show for the Southern layout currently is Acton, which is at the London Underground Museum, Acton. 2nd to the 3rd of July. We have Red Hill Brick Show on the 6th of August, and we have a model railway show, which our Lego layout is appearing at, 24th to the 25th of September. And hopefully, although we haven't heard back yet, because it's early days, we will be at the Great Western Brick Show, also known as Steam, at Swindon, the 1st and the 2nd of October. So that's our upcoming shows list for the Southern Club at the moment. There are more northern stuff. Just follow our Twitter and Facebook and things if you want to come along. Lego train fans with their own locos are welcome to come along and run if you would like to. Just send us a message beforehand so we can sort of plan around that. So the final section of the podcast we have is future aims. And so I've only split this into sort of two sections. One is track plan and the other is landscape. So I don't know who's best to speak about the track plan at the moment.
I think
Maybe.
I'm best for track plan.
Probably Henry.
Leon's better at the landscapey bit.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Off you go.
Okay.
What are we doing that's different?
Okay. So the next major thing to do on our layout is actually it's mainly for Rory to do. Rory, would you like to speak about what we're doing with the church?
Yep. So at the moment, we had a slight issue with some of the scenery for the Reading show we mentioned earlier. So I had a church model that came along from a previous project I was working on. So we modified that to make it fit within there as a temporary thing, just for that show. And everyone seemed to like it at the show. So we're now building that in as a permanent section. And we're also working on the corner and the bit against the backboard of that particular part of the layout, just to try and make it try to sort of make it all fit in together a bit nicer, because we're just changing around to make it make a bit more sense. So we're going to build a footbridge against the backdrop to try and hide that the way that goes through. So it just makes it more of a scenic break rather than just hitting the backboard directly, and possibly making a bit of a rail yard in that corner as well, just to make the whole thing a bit more interesting.
Okay, so as Rory mentioned, we've got that planned, and that means that for anyone who saw our layout at Reading, the road crossing isn't going to be where it was anymore. I believe it's going to just disappear into the backboards.
Yes, we are having a T-junction-esque thing going on, and just some little changes here and there with the houses going around a corner instead, just again make it a bit more interesting to look at.
Yeah. So then with the track plan, our short-term plans really are just when we eventually sort out baseboards, which hopefully will be soon-ish, we will just modify the layout so that it will fit on those, because it's fairly close, but it's not quite the right shape or size for it. So we'll just have to make a few modifications to allow that. And then after that, we will at some point start planning the second version of the layout, which, I think the only thing we've decided on is we're definitely going to have another loop, and that will be R88 track, because we've currently got R72. But other than that, I don't think we've really decided much, but we do want 2 loops so that we can run 2 trains easily, and then we'll have other bits, and we'll have a proper discussion about it when we get round to planning it.
Yes, so one of the few things that need changing with the landscaping is with the addition of an extra loop, being R88, the next one up from what we currently have. It basically involves making the layout a little bit bigger and rebuilding everything on the outer edges to some degree. So, for example, on my section, I will need to rebuild the big hill that we've got, and also figure out where I'm going to put the goods shed, because that wouldn't fit either. But I'm sure next year's shows, or late, early 2024, we'll have a almost brand new layout built with double loop, turntable added on. As I've just mentioned, the turntable, one of the features that we are planning to add is an ability to add an extra sort of module on either side at the end of our sidings. So, for example, I'm building a turntable and a small engine shed. Someone else wants to build a bridge, although it's a bit more and drastic. We've just so that members that have joined us post the layout being built, they can still build something that could be used at a show without needing a full layout. It could be 2 extra sidings, or maybe it's just an extra bit of straight track, but it's just something else that people can add, and it will add a little bit of diversity to what we take to shows, as some people don't like seeing the same thing at every single show.
Yeah, it's nice to have variation, and also for the people operating, having the same track plan at every show. I think we discovered when we went to a kind of more fixed layout for shows, because we used to take some scenery and a box of track and just work it out on the day, depending on what size we had available to us. having a more fixed track plan is a bit boring. But I'm probably on the extreme of that because I go to a lot of shows and I have to set it up. So, okay. So on that note, I think we can close the podcast. Thank you to all the members who have come along and contributed. So we have Trace, who had audio issues and wasn't able to take part a lot of the way through. Levi, who was the podcast producer. Thank you, Levi, who also spoke, so double job. Henry, Will, Rory, and John, who I think, John, if this is your first time on the podcast, I think it might be.
I don't think it is. I think I was on one of the earlier ones that was a visual where we had a
maybe
video
so.
on it.
I'm pretty certain he's been on before.
Yeah, maybe so. The voice is very familiar, so there we go. So thanks to all the members. Thank you for listening to the LNUR Line. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Libsyn if you prefer to download your podcast. So just look on the LNUR website or lukrailway.co.uk. Go to the podcast section. You can watch the podcasts through YouTube or find a link to listen to them in whatever you like. And a final reminder from Rory and Levi, which I've definitely not been ignoring, is there is a video of the Southern Layout, a very recent video, at Reading Brick Show. And it shows all of the details. The nice terraced houses are the best bit, aren't they? Levi's corner, Rory's church, all of the other bit, some shunting, stuff like that. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you for episode 20 at some point soon.